Welcome to the AirPod, an aviation career podcast. My name's Mitchell. Have you ever wondered how the world of private jet sales works?
People say to me, "Oh, you must meet amazing people." I do. You must meet famous people. They're not really that famous.
How have the buyers changed over the past couple decades?
Buyers are definitely getting younger, coming in buying G650s, which is pretty wild.
Today we talk with Colin. He sold jets in Europe and the US, and he'll let us know what it takes to be a jet broker.
I'll use the term emotional endurance. As a broker, you are the product.
Why should somebody use a jet broker to begin with?
I see what other people don't see in terms of aircraft that are coming to market. If you're coming in alone, you will not get access to those.
And what happens when a deal doesn't quite go to plan?
You can hear the airplane change shape. The exit door moved a little bit. I went up to the cockpit. I was like, what's going on? And sure enough, the pressure seal goes.
This is a second career for Colin, so stick around until the end if you want to hear his advice on how you could get started in the aviation industry. Now, let's hear his thoughts on how the business aviation market has changed over the last decade.
Well, I think buyers are definitely getting younger. I think, driven by increase in wealth in the world. So I was looking at numbers this morning for the number of millionaires, new millionaires, and it's something like 400,000 every year, which is crazy. So, I'm not sure what the number is for billionaires, but it all works its way up. We saw a lot of first-time buyers coming in 2020, end of 2020, 2021, 2022, when air travel was inaccessible. People turned to private aviation and one-off charters, and then realized that maybe I should buy my own airplane now. So there was certainly a shift, a lot of new entrants into the market, and we're still seeing that. Actually, I'm speaking with a first-time buyer right now. He's chartered before, and now it's his time. Interestingly, he's going straight from one-off charter / jet card to full ownership. So, if we touch on that now, the graduation of people from a one-off charter, you're going on your holidays, you charter the family down to wherever, Turks and Caicos for a week, to saying, right, I'm actually going to fly 50 hours a year, and then graduating into a jet card, maybe it's 100 hours, fractional ownership. So the guys at NetJets, FlexJet provide a fractional program where you own a fraction of an airplane, and you're probably doing 100 plus, maybe 200 hours with that, to full aircraft ownership, which is your PhD, I suppose, if you use the graduating analogy. So what was interesting in 2021, 22, and still is people aren't really coming in and buying a light jet. There's buyers coming in buying G650s and going straight to the top in terms of aircraft ownership, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, you don't see that much in general aviation. And I imagine the business aviation world was probably that way, a decade ago or more, where people would take those incremental steps up as they needed more capability, more size. In general aviation, people usually start out with something smaller, and then maybe they get a family or they need more range. But what do you think has spurred that jump where people want to come in and go straight to the top of the line?
I don't know. It's sheer wealth, isn't it? I'm not really sure what the reason is, and it's a big jump to take, but I don't know. Maybe it's become more of a, maybe it's appreciated more of the business tool aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
Some might say, oh, people want to just show off their jet, but it's, there is definitely some of that, right? You see it on social media, and maybe celebrities showing off their jet, but that's a fraction of the ownership, the real ownership. And people say to me, oh, you must meet amazing people. I do. You must meet famous people. They're not really that famous, right?
Yeah.
Most of them are just business owners that need the tool to get around. Maybe they have a factory, an outlet, in every state in the US, and they need to get around to those places. So it's really a tool to help you improve your relationships and make sure your business is running correctly.
Yeah, one of the things that I think people always find surprising is like Walmart has one of the largest private fleets of any company in the world, just because they have so many remote locations that they're always going to.
Exactly.
You touched on the first time buyers and how the pandemic kind of spurred that on. And understandable, right? Like airlines were cutting routes like crazy. Even when they started coming back, people didn't really want to be on an airliner trapped in a tube with a bunch of other strangers.
Yeah.
And you mentioned they might have chartered first. What are you seeing with the first time buyers coming into the market versus the more experienced owners, the people that have had jets in the past?
So, yeah, if we use an example I have right now, the US is a much more mature market, right? And then, so with that, you have people that are upgrading their airplane for maybe the fourth, fifth time. So they've been there, they've done that. There's not a lot of things that scare them. Naturally, with a first time buyer, they're going to be more careful. And, while I'm on it, a plug, I would never recommend a first time buyer to go shopping for an airplane on their own because there's just so much to manage, right? Apart from buying the airplane, you've got to pick a management company. You've got to find a good aviation attorney. Maybe you're going to finance it, so you need to find a financer. So there's a lot of moving parts if it's your first time. So with a more experienced aircraft buyer, right, has said that they might be upgrading for the fourth, fifth time even. They're used to having problems during a pre-purchase inspection, right? So the airplane goes in, the buyer pays for a pre-purchase inspection, and naturally you're going to find things that you don't like, which is exactly why you're doing a pre-purchase inspection.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're finding these things, as long as it's not material damage, material corrosion, or undisclosed damage, material corrosion, well then, it's like sending your car into a garage to get a check. You're going to have issues. You're paying for the pre-buy. You want to find things because the seller will have to rectify those discrepancies. Um, with a first-time buyer, they'd be less likely to, well, if they find anything during the pre-buy, they're going to get a bit concerned about it, maybe overly concerned. Whereas with an experienced buyer, that's the way it goes. They expect to find things.
Yeah. How do
Um,
you work through those concerns with them, or just tell them like, hey, this kind of stuff comes up, it's normal, or you a little more careful with those conversations?
yeah, I think it's a good thing. We're finding them now. Okay, if we find that the airplane has been in an accident and we weren't told about it, well then, no, it's a reason to get out of the deal. If there's material corrosion that's going to take weeks, months to fix, well then that's an issue. However, if it's just parts or some components that are worn or whatever, um, yeah, it's good we're finding it now. So I think it's up to the broker on both sides of the deal and the attorneys as well to explain that, this is just the way it goes. As I said, if you go back to the car example, you send your car into a garage for what you thought was a steering misalignment, and you end up coming out with a new timing belt and the other stuff, right? It's part of the process. So I would say as long as you're at doing an appropriate level pre-purchase inspection, you don't have much to worry about, and you've selected an aircraft that the history, the pedigree, who's been operating and who's owned it. You're comfortable with it, well then get that into pre-buy, and when you find stuff and the seller pays for it, great. It's nothing to be concerned with.
Yeah, that's the great thing about aircraft too, compared to cars like your example, is there's a very detailed history, or there should be. If you're finding an aircraft with big gaps in the history, that's obviously a red flag. But especially the higher end aircraft, if you're buying a Gulfstream, there's going to be a very detailed history of every piece of maintenance that went on that aircraft throughout its entire life.
So there's one example I just had yesterday on an airplane. It had, well, damage history. I was like, oh no, this has damage history. So I went in, had a look. I checked out the documents I was sent, and they found a dent on the nose cone. They don't know how it happened. It's within allowable limits, but it has, and I looked at the photos, it's minuscule, but it has to be documented. So yes, this airplane does have damage history, but it's, something so negligible that in a car would never have been documented.
You mentioned that the U.S. is a more mature market in the business aviation space. What do you see comparing the U.S. market for business aircraft versus overseas?
Um, yeah, so I worked in London with Jetcraft for 4 years, and I'm out here about 2.5 years. It's down to an experience thing. As I said, the buyers out here, I say it's more like dealing cars out here than it is airplanes because they're just so used to trading them. They don't get, as I said, they don't get scared about things. They know what they're looking for. There's less prestige about it.
Mm,
Whereas in Europe, it's I don't know, it's just a bit more stiff. Whereas here, okay, send me this spec. Let's have a look. What are they asking? Oh, I bought one of those a couple of years ago. Like it's very quick. There's less education involved as well because the buyers are more educated out here. Yeah, culturally as well, it's more accepted in the US to own an airplane as a corporate, say. Every corporation in the US has an airplane, and it's just the way things work. It's the way business is done. Whereas in Europe, corporates are less likely to buy an airplane because of stigma attached to it, the cost maybe, or the carbon footprint. Whereas in the US, that's a cost on the business. It's like already built in.
right.
Yeah,
And probably something to be said for transportation infrastructure to Europe versus the US. Way harder to get to remote places over here.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And if you look at it, I cover the Midwest, so I'm driving around, drive past a lot of cornfields,
Hmm.
and you can drive 5 hours here and not get over a state line. Coming from Ireland, if you drive 5 hours from Dublin and drive west, you reach the other side of the island. On roads that are a lot smaller, and so you're exactly, yeah, you're right. If you're one of those business owners with a a factory, a retail outlet, a restaurant, whatever it is in each state, you're not driving, and you're probably not able to fly commercial because it won't get you to where that factory is, and you're not getting a train because the train infrastructure isn't there, and so you're buying an airplane. You're flying. You would have to fly in a one-off charter to get to the factories, or and just time wise, it might take you a day to get to a destination, whereas this could take you a matter of hours.
If someone's looking to get into private aviation, there's that tiered approach that we talked about going from chartering to jet cards to ownership. Where are those thresholds and how does someone, a company or an individual decide, okay, now it's time to step up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd like to say there's a lot of science behind that. You know, I would say if you're doing one-off charter and you're doing 50 hours a year, it's probably time to think about a jet card because you'll get better rates for buying a 50-hour block or a 100-hour block. Any more than that, you should start thinking about ownership or fractional, or maybe fractional first, then ownership. But if you ask the accountant, right, like if you bring it to the accountant and say, I want to buy an airplane or I want to buy a jet card, they'll still try and compare it to commercial, flying commercial, whether it's business class or whatever, and it's just not a like for like product for reasons we just discussed, right? Trying to reach places that are hard to reach. Um, it's just not a like for like product. And in terms of aircraft ownership, yeah, you might say 200 hours is the point where you should buy an airplane. Others would argue different. It's
Hmm.
very hard to run those numbers and get a clean answer. What you can't measure are the intangible benefits that flying private or flying your own airplane brings, right? Getting to those business meetings, last minute business meeting that you could end up signing a deal that you wouldn't have got otherwise because maybe a competitor is going in or something. It's very hard to measure that return, but it's if you ask anyone with an airplane, they'll 100% tell you that they've had moments like that where they were able to get somewhere quick, or um, the access that it brings.
Yeah, and you're not at the mercy of the airlines too with their schedules, connections, showing up 2 hours ahead of time to go through TSA and all that.
Tell me about it. I'm
Yeah.
flying all the time, and I've said this many times. Every time I'm stuck in a queue in the airport, I'm like, this is good for business.
Yeah.
It's all good. This is good. Even though I'm about to miss a flight.
With the buying process, what somebody coming in for the first time, what's the biggest misunderstanding you see or confusion you see with the first time buyer?
Well, another shameless plug, going it alone, coming from maybe they've bought real estate on their own, maybe that's their business in real estate and they're experts in that field. You know, they've bought cars before, they've shopped online and found supercars or whatever, and you know, got a good deal. Coming in alone, I see the market and I see what other people don't see in terms of off-market options and aircraft that are coming to market and then get sold before they even reach the market.
Mm.
Right, they're the off-market opportunities you want to be looking for. The early heads up on great pedigree airplanes that have offers on them before they even reach the market. And if you're coming in alone, you will not get access to those because um, good brokers that have access to them save them for their acquisition clients. And notes that go out in within the broker circles, I want a Challenger 350, or I've got a qualified buyer ready to go on a whatever global. They're the ones with signed up acquisitions. And if I have a Challenger 350 coming in my territory, for sure, for that seller, I need to find him a deal as soon as possible. And if I know someone over in California is looking for a Challenger 350 of that pedigree, I'm going to call them right away, and the deal could be done before it gets to market.
Right.
As long as they're offering the right number in line with what I've discussed with the seller, and he's happy with that number, we can get a deal done.
Yeah.
If you're not getting that number, then the airplane goes to market, the public market, and you search for the highest bidder. But there's a high bidder within the a fair market value plus, call it. You're going to do the deal off market.
What would you say is the percentage split between off market deals and on market deals?
Great question. I actually told myself I was going to look at those numbers recently. It's got to be 20%.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere around there.
Yeah, not insignificant for sure, especially if you're looking for the
No,
right aircraft.
the problem is with off-market airplanes, and we can have a whole podcast on the off-market jet. And I put a few posts on LinkedIn recently to get a lot of engagement because it's an interesting and opaque world, right? There is a lot of off-market airplanes where the seller's just looking for too much, as I call it, having a go at the market.
Yeah.
They're not fully committed to selling, but if they get a premium, they'll sell it. But everyone wants to sell their assets more than what they're worth.
Yeah. Probably some of the post-COVID boom contributed to that too. We saw that in the housing market, saw that in vehicles, especially enthusiast cars. People were used to being able to sell for 10, 20, 30% over market. And as that started to pull back and get back to reality a little bit, I think some people are still living in that 2021, 2022 timeframe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the market.
Yeah.
That was I've looked at the numbers in detail, and that was like a 1 in 40 year event.
Mm-hmm.
That interaction between the supply and the demand in 2021 and 2022, sending values up. That was like a 1 in 40 year event. But it's come back down, and sellers, they're still trying to hang on to those prices. We're back into a world where aircraft depreciate in value.
Yeah.
And that's normality.
Yeah, and it there's something to be said for delays on new deliveries and stuff. You look at PC-12 wait lists, and I don't know what they're at now, but the Vision Jet had a long wait list, like a 2-year wait list at one point. PC-24's long wait list. So, there's some value to having the aircraft right now versus waiting on the new one. How does someone decide, hey, I want to go new instead of pre-owned? Maybe I get more technology. Maybe I just want something new from the manufacturer. And when you're making a price comparison, if you're looking at, these are probably two bad examples, but say you're looking at a PC-24 and a King Air 350. And, I can get the King Air now. It doesn't have quite the capability, but price is somewhat equivalent, probably a little cheaper. But if you're looking at an older, maybe cheaper or equally priced aircraft versus waiting the 2 years or whatever it takes to get a new one, how does that decision get made?
Speed, right? If you want an airplane tomorrow or within whatever 2 months, we can get a deal done in 2 months on something pre-owned. It could come down to they just want the experience with Bombardier, Gulfstream, one of the OEMs, right? Because they'll roll out the red carpet. You'll get to spec your airplane. You'll go out to the shop and pick your leather, carpet, sidewalls. Everything is customizable, and I've never done it, but I'm sure it's a great experience for a buyer to go through that. But then you're waiting 2 years, as you said, for your airplane. So you got to weigh it up. If you have an airplane already, well then maybe that's what you do. But if you decide, maybe you came into some liquidity and you want to step up and buy an airplane, you probably don't want to wait 2 years. And most of the OEMs are, as I said, probably like 18 months at least on all their popular models.
So getting into the career itself, I've always been very fascinated by that level of jet sales. I think to compare it, it's easy to compare to cars because I think that's what people know. But car sales, obviously, mostly a volume game. But what are the differences you see in selling a very high value asset, like you're talking, 10, 20, $30 million for some of the aircraft plus, versus something that's more low value and higher volume?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I'll use the term emotional endurance because it's very low volume and high ticket, low volume. So you could have three proposals out, and you're hoping for to list an airplane or to help a client buy an airplane, and you could knock out all three of them, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like a make or break for your year, say. So, um, in terms of the sales itself, I always think it's kind of in between cars and real estate, in the sense that with real estate, you will list a client's house, property, whatever it is, on the market and bring a buyer to them. Whereas with cars, you will most likely, if you want a dealership to do it, you most likely trade in with the dealership. You don't, unless it's a supercar or a high ticket car. You won't generally list a car with a broker or whatever. It's similar to real estate in that sense that you list a client's property, put it on the market, or list the asset, but you're dealing with a machine, which is a depreciating asset. And when you're, discussing the sale price or the ask price with a jet seller, it's very different to the conversation with a property, because the aircraft is depreciating in value. So it's always trending down. So if they don't like that number, well, in 6 months' time, they're definitely not going to like the number.
Yeah, only gets worse.
And we call that chasing the slide, basically, when they want X and they hold out for that, and you're telling them it's worth Y. And then by the time they say, okay, let's sell it at Y, it's like, well, actually, it's worth Z. Now, we're chasing the slide. And if you're not in a rush to sell, that's okay. But most, if people want to sell the airplane, that's where I come in, and it's my job then to sell the airplane and make sure it's gone, so you don't own two in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at real estate, the value of the asset is trending up, right? Real estate trends up over time. So if the seller isn't getting the number they want now, they'll say, wait. So you could be waiting a long time, and then eventually you find a buyer that's willing to pay their price. But that never happens with airplane sales, unless you're entering into 2021, 2022, when values did go up. But that's, as I said, a 1 in 40-year event, like on average.
What would you consider essential skills to being in that industry, to dealing with those type of individuals and the expectations they have?
I think you just got to be rational, have a calm demeanor, right? Emotional endurance. A seller will always want more, as much as possible for the airplane. The buyer will always want to pay as little as possible. and you're in the middle to try and just be rational and do a deal within fair market that, when you enter that deal, both sides are still happy. And yeah, I think you just got to have to be very rational. Um, and then in terms of like skills, yeah, it helps to have some technical. I have an engineering background. It's not in aviation. I've actually got a civil engineering degree. But when stuff comes up in a pre-buy, I appreciate the nature of the component that's gone wrong and what it does, and why it's so expensive, and why it'll take 6 months to get a replacement, right? And worse, like for a windshield or something. I've got a varied background. If you ask all the brokers out there what their background is, we're all, there's no jet sales degree, right? We've all got a very varied experience, and that helps when you're talking to clients, because you're able to have a conversation about a lot of different things and find common ground and have you know have more conversation and ultimately build trust with the client.
What is one of the biggest challenges you would consider when you're breaking in or trying to break into the industry? Say somebody's come into this fresh, as you mentioned, a variety of different backgrounds, maybe in sales, maybe not in sales, but they're trying to get into jet brokerage or jet sales. What's a huge
Yeah.
challenge they're going to have to overcome?
Well, I think for me coming in, so I'm doing this nearly 7 years now. But before that, I had a career in the oil and gas industry. I was an engineer. I was designing offshore subsea systems for oil and gas production. So subsea manifolds and pipelines and all of that, which was great, but didn't teach me anything about business jets in terms of the different models. And that was a huge learning curve for me, because, okay, each OEM has, call it, 5 different models that you can go and buy now, around 5 each. But then they have 20, 25 models before that, if not more, right? So there's hundreds of different aircraft models of all different vintages going back, 25 years, 30 years old. To know everything about every single one of them is impossible, but all the information is available. So you can research every single aircraft model and you'll find a wealth of information about every model and the history of it. And so the information is there. So that was a learning curve for me, to learn the different models. And now, as I've got into it, working deals, I know kind of what to look for on certain models. I know if Model X is going in to a pre-buy, we might find something here, or, the good places to look, really. It's not my job to look, but it's my job to kind of warn the client that, chances are we're going to find something here, and that's okay. I've seen it before, and it all gets fixed. So yeah, that was a challenge for me. And then building your reputation. So we're not a manufacturer. We don't make airplanes. So we don't have a product that people will just come to us because we have this product. Whereas if you're working with one of the OEMs and you want to buy a new whatever, you have to go to your sales rep in your territory and talk to them. Nobody has to come and talk to me unless they're coming for a reputation for a service that I provide. So building your reputation in the industry and keeping a good reputation is even more important, right? What did I say? You build it in, takes years to build and minutes to ruin. So I'm very 37, 38 next month. I've still got a lot of runway, skills to pun, and yeah, my reputation is extremely important.
How do you go about building that reputation and credibility? Because again, you're handling extremely high ticket assets that people rely on every single day. Somebody coming in fresh, that has never done it before. How do they get in and say, okay, now I'm going to sell this $10 million jet?
I think a good road in is, and this has been said from more people, this has been mentioned on podcasts before. The charter brokerage world is great because it's a job you can get into in your 20s, and you're selling one-off charter. You learn everything about the models, aircraft models, by because you've got clients calling you up going, Forbes, I want to get down to Bahamas from Chicago, and you give me a quote. So you've got to figure out what is an efficient airplane to do that mission and get back to the guy with a competitive quote. And if you're sending a G650 down when you can send a light jet, um, your quote is going to be three times the number it should be. Unless they want a large cabin, heavy jet, well then, and they're ready to pay that money. But yeah, so I think the charter brokerage world is good. Also getting some like operational experience. Go and work with a management company or an operator or work in a flight department. That'll be all great experience. You're close to the airplane. You know how they operate, what the different capabilities are. And overall, I'd say, as I said, I'm 37. I'm doing this 7 years now. I don't think you're ready for jet sales until you've done something before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like these guys are, although the general age of the buyer is getting younger, my last client was nearly 90 years old. And if you send a junior to meet these guys, like I was in his eyes, I was very junior. So
Sure.
I'm 37.
Yeah.
But any younger, and they get a sense that you don't know what you're talking about, or you haven't done this before, or you're bluffing it. If you're asked a question and you try and fluff an answer, which is never good in any meeting or whatever, you get found out pretty quickly. These guys are not stupid. They've got to this position because they've got general level of intelligence that they can sniff out people that are bullshitting.
Yeah, and like you said, the ones that have done it before, they might be on their fourth or fifth jet, and they've been around. They know what they're looking for, and if they're
Yeah,
just making stuff up on the fly, they're going to catch on to that right away.
yeah,
As business aviation advances, we see a lot of innovation, I think, in like the eVTOL space,
yeah,
this electric air taxi and all that stuff. And there's been some progress in business jets, specifically in larger jets with sustainable aviation fuel, more efficient aircraft. I think everybody's trending that way. But what do you see as some of the obstacles and opportunities there, as there's more pressure on people reducing carbon footprints? There's some of the like jet tracking, Elon, Taylor Swift. There's dedicated accounts just to tracking their movements. How do we
yeah,
overcome those kind of negative viewpoints on business aviation?
yeah. It's a good question. I think for me, if you think of the people that are influencing, the bigger picture items in the world, it's probably the 1% group that are flying around in business jets.
Hmm.
And they're not going to fly commercial. Elon is not going. You're not going to see Elon on a business class ticket anytime soon. I don't know how you get over the like. At the end of the day, there is no replacement for the jet engine right now. So you're not doing whatever over, call it 2,000 nautical miles without a jet engine. So unless there's a change and new technology that will replace that, you're certainly not getting right. The G800, it goes 8,000 nautical miles, right? The Global 8,000, all the same. There's no other technology to compete with that right now. However, the number of flights that are actually done on a G800 and a Global 8,000 and the 10X is coming out from Falcon, it probably won't be flown over 4,000 nautical miles. I know, like I know what the numbers are. There is some stat that 10% of the flights will be over 6,000 nautical miles. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the lighter space when you're going 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles for it to be replaced with eVTOL or some of the electric aircraft. But I think once you get over that range of whatever 2,000, your options are very limited. So I don't know what technology will come in to replace it. Maybe
Yeah, I don't know that there is one immediately on the horizon. I know there's been huge advances in the efficiency of jet engines over time. Obviously, we see that I think more with commercial aviation and the super high bypass turbofans.
Yeah,
One, they get more benefit per cost of the unit for that because they're flying thousands and thousands and thousands of flights with each aircraft where a G800 might do, I don't know, 50 individual flights in a year, 100 on the high end. Um, so I don't know how that translates to business aviation, but it is interesting to think about. And I imagine that there's probably not people that are buying 40, 50, $60 million jets that are thinking, how do I make this as economical as possible? Their operating cost is marginal compared to the purchase price of the jet. But it's an interesting area to watch and see what does come out there. I think one technology that could be interesting, and they've been working on it for a long time, is the open fan concept. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but basically it's almost like a turbofan or a turboprop that's flipped backwards, but it
Okay.
uses like a jet turbine. It's a mix of a jet turbine and a turboprop. Like Embraer is working on a version of that for regional travel, and there's some efficiency gains there. But again, if you're getting over 4,000 nautical miles, that's not going to be efficient either. It's going to be slower. It's going to be louder.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think jet engines for the foreseeable future are the only option.
Yeah. And there's been huge efficiency gains. As I said, the high bypass. If you look at the difference between the size of the engine on, the first 737 compared to it now, it's massive. That's why they had to move them forward on the max, right? Because the engines are just getting so big. The inlet's getting
Yeah.
so big.
And the range on the G800 is incredible too, because it's one, it does carry a lot of fuel, but compared to an aircraft from 20 years ago, like the original Citation 10, could do Mach 0.92 or 25 or whatever it was, and now the G800 will do 0.93 something, and still go 6,000 nautical miles at that speed. So they've
Yeah,
found
yeah.
efficiency gains there still. We talked about the younger buyers and what kind of their process is like buying for the first time, but are their desires for the aircraft different? Are you seeing different use cases or different interest in the type of aircraft that they're flying versus the older buyers?
Not particularly. No, I can't see, nothing worth mentioning. Yeah, I think mid-size, right? Mid-size airplanes, just so much demand because they're just so if you've got 3,000 nautical miles, you're getting like if you've got 2,500 from Chicago, you're getting out to the East Coast, out to the West Coast. So you don't need much more than that to get around the States, like a Challenger 300, Challenger 350, the G400 coming out, the Falcon 2000. They're all getting you around the US, no problem. And if you're a light jet buyer, you could be upgrading to a mid-size, but you've also got a lot of first-time buyers coming in going straight to mid-size. As I mentioned before, there are buyers coming in going straight to heavy, but they're more likely going into light or into mid-size. So you've kind of got like two inflows into the mid-size market from the light jet owners upgrading and new entrants coming straight in and buying a mid-size. So that's a particularly busy segment for me, or anywhere in the US. So I'm in the Midwest. So as I said, it's a perfect airplane to get east and west and back.
Technology's role in improving the actual transactional process. Have you seen advancements there? Because it feels like, again, I'm not very deeply educated on jet transactions like that. But
Yeah, yeah,
from what I've seen from the outside, obviously everything's changed with the way that technology is helping improve transactions. You see it online with Amazon. You can instant buy whatever you want that's delivered to your door the next day. Um, is there anything that's happening in the business aviation space that's helping improve or speed up that transaction process for buyers and sellers?
yeah. There is a software that is built to manage the transaction from the letter of intent all the way through closing. Personally, I haven't used it, but for what I've seen, the speed. So when I was working in Dublin, in the aviation space, and contracts had to be like printed out, signed, and scanned back in. It was crazy, right? The contracts were probably like, I don't know, max a mil.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I came into business aviation, it was all DocuSign. So it wasn't like I had to wait for that. It was already ready in. and that 100% speeds up the process trying to sign documents. Um, so a lot of so that's in terms of your contracting. There's been a push to try and standardize letters of intent, aircraft purchase agreements, and I'd say that you could probably get a PA 80% of the way, but then the rest will be, particular clauses dealing with your deal, right? Or specifically related to your deal that you still need to fill out, still needs to be negotiated. So, there is some work, legal work there, still required that technology won't replace. Then we're into the pre-buy. So the MROs, the maintenance, repair, and overhaul shops now, they all have a portal where you can log in. So you'll see exactly what inspections they've done, what discrepancies they've found, and what the rectification plan is. And the sell side of the deal and the buy side of the deal will have access to that. So when you have a phone call, everyone is on the same page of what discrepancies they found and what they're doing and how much it's going to cost. So I think that's been pretty, it's been pretty helpful having those systems and just being kept up to date, because as a broker, you need to know exactly what's going on with your deal in the pre-buy.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps a lot. And then I'm just thinking, as you come to close the deal, I can't think of any specific technology that would help it really. Still got a lot of paperwork, right? Your bill of sale, it's still all placed with escrow and signed before, positioned with escrow. I don't think there's a technology really that I've used anyway. Maybe there is one, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, I just wondered mainly is that helping bring down the purchase time? Because we talked about, it can take 3-4 months to go from the time that you decide, yes, I'm going to buy this aircraft until you're sitting in it and flying it. Um, and I don't know if that timeline's come down that you've seen over the years.
Not really. The big things in a deal are the speed of attorneys. I
Yep.
won't bash attorneys, but it takes time to review contracts. Letter of intent could be hours, right? There's just really not that much thinking involved in a letter of intent that it should take more than 24 or 48 hours. But a purchase agreement is a much lengthier document, and that takes time to get through. So that can delay getting into a deal. But then once you've got agreement signed, you know where you're flying the airplane, you know where you're doing pre-buy, then you're at the mercy of the maintenance shop. And even if they do everything on time, you can still be waiting on a part that will delay the deal by weeks, months, whatever it is, right? So, and that's out of your control, and technology can't really fix that, right? I will say it's never the brokers that are delaying the deal.
Yeah. You guys want it done as fast as possible.
Exactly, right? We want everything done right, but done as fast as possible. And yeah, if you're a broker delaying a deal, yeah, you're right in the firing line.
What do you find is the most fulfilling aspect of working with your clients? And do you have a most memorable deal or client experience?
Well, the satisfaction is when a client's happy, right? So I had the client buy a Challenger 350 here about 2 years ago, and he's delighted with his deal. Got a beautiful airplane, and I'm still talking to him today, which is a good sign, I suppose. And yeah, he's happy because I sent him another 350, asking him, if any of your buddies are looking for a 350. Got another one. I said, I still prefer your one. And he said, definitely prefer my one. So when you hear stuff like that, I'm also talking to the pilots and they're really happy with it. They haven't had any issues. That's, you breathe a sigh of relief when you hear stories like that, because I can pick the best pedigree airplane at the best deal. No idea what's going to be found in a pre-buy. I hope that there's nothing major because it's been looked after, well, and it goes in the pre-buy. But I don't know what's going to happen. I also don't know what's going to happen in 4 years' time to that airplane. It's a machine. Nobody knows what's going to happen to their car after a couple of years. It's a machine. They break. Some break worse than others. I'll just say, because I think people will get scared off when I say that they break, and I kind of use that word quite flippantly. Stuff goes wrong that's easily fixed, and it's not gonna break midair and have a catastrophic, whatever catastrophic event. Even if something does go wrong in the air, which it happens, there's so many systems with fail-safe mechanisms and redundancies built into the airplane that I was talking to a pilot here recently in Chicago that had an engine failure on a mid-size airplane, and he was trained for it. So that would be something that I would consider a serious event. But serious events can happen, and you're still completely safe. The machine is built to fail in a safe way, if that makes sense for the non-engineers. For me, as you come back to satisfaction, and when I hear a client is enjoying the airplane and it's flying well for them, that's one, a sigh of relief, and also a sense of a lot of satisfaction.
Do you have a deal that stands out in your mind, either good or bad?
I've had some good. I'm trying to think of a bad deal because that's more interesting. I haven't had anything like major. Look, you have your moments on deals for sure, right? Emotions run high as you get towards the end. Maybe it's a seller that's looking for too much, or a buyer that's looking for too much. I haven't had anything where I had a complete blow up. And then good deals, right? A different client, a Challenger 350 this year, older guy, great client, and the aircraft was actually in London, and I was traveling at the end of the year. I was in Cape Town. I flew back to London, and I was in London for a close deal in London. And I actually got to fly back with the airplane to Chicago,
Cool.
which was great. And it's kind of rare. People say, "Oh, you must fly in business jets all the time." I'm like, a little bit, but it's rare where I actually need to go from the A to the B.
Yeah.
Usually it's A back to A,
Yeah. Yeah.
like a test flight. Um, so that was a pretty cool deal, and we actually delivered it to the hangar, so it was nice. I've had serious delays on deals. Like I think every broker can attest to that. That right, there's just supply chain issues and maintenance shops that every maintenance shop is crying out for more techs. So there's a lot of turnover, and you can have experiences where we're just waiting on parts, or it just doesn't seem to be moving at the pace you'd like it to move at.
I'll give you an example. I wasn't directly involved in this, but I used to work at a small private airport, and one of the members there was getting a new PC-12 or I don't know if it was new, but he was getting a PC-12 delivered that he had just bought. And
Yeah.
pretty challenging airport. It's up in the mountains. There's terrain fairly close on both sides. A big bank on the left side of the runway, and so the new owner standing out there watching his plane get delivered, and the pilot goes left to center line on the landing, digs the wing into the embankment, actually tries to go around, and fortunately for him, the gear collapsed before he was able to do that because he was just dragging the wing like 300 feet down the bank, and the gear
Oh,
collapsed and stopped the plane before the end of the runway. So
oh,
that is what comes to my mind when I think of a bad deal. I can't imagine being the broker that just sold this guy an airplane and the delivery pilot crashes it before he even gets
oh
to set
no.
foot in it.
Yeah, I did have a test flight on an airplane, and the buyer wanted to bring it up to 45,000 or max, max altitude. And when we got up to about 40, the pressure seal in the door leaked. So
Mm.
it started to let out air like a whistle. It actually sounded like a warning sound in the airplane. And so I went up to the cockpit. I was like, "What's going on?" It's not being in the buy side broker. Sorry, I was the sell side broker in that case. You don't want anything to go wrong during the test flight. It's the last couple of hours in your deal that if everything goes smooth here, you close the deal. And sure enough, the pressure seal goes, so we had to land the airplane, and yeah, that was. It was also hard to replicate the issue. So they land the airplane at the shop, then they pressurize the airplane to try and replicate the problem to find out what happened, and they were struggling to replicate the issue, but eventually it got sorted, and yeah, it was a couple of weeks to close the deal. Then when you're getting up to those altitudes, you can hear the airplane change shape. This little, like the exit door, moved a little bit. You can tell there's stuff happening, and it's a little bit, you're on the edge slightly, but you're confident that the machine, as I said, is if something does go wrong, can never be like, well, 99.999 chances it's never going to be as bad as worth worrying about.
Right. What surprised you the most about this industry when you joined?
I suppose it was a world I didn't really know existed. As I said, there's hundreds of different aircraft models, and unless you're looking for them when you land in your 737 to an airport, you don't see many of them. If you're landing into an FBO somewhere, yeah, that's where they all are. If you're down in Augusta during the Masters, you see the amount of private aircraft out there. But yeah, it was a world I wasn't too familiar with at all. Completely unfamiliar. I'd never flown in a private jet. My dad is ex Aer Lingus, so that was my kind of aviation world, the commercial aviation world. But the business aviation world is it's a lot smaller, but it's a great industry. A lot of great people working in it, and I'd say that it's an industry where when people come in, they don't usually leave because the opportunities are good. It's very interesting, and you can do anything within this industry from being an airframe and power plant mechanic to a pilot, a broker, more operationally, more in operations like yourself. There's a role for everyone.
Yeah. I think that's what I love about aviation too. And, we discussed it before we got on this call, but I just want to help introduce other people to all the opportunities that are out there because, there might be people like yourself that just never even knew that you could go and sell private jets to people.
For sure. And I didn't know, right? It was a conversation with someone in the industry that, I was working with a Boeing subsidiary in Dublin. So, yeah, and I suppose it's a good point to discuss like my change of career because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about business aviation. I wasn't working in aviation up until around 2016, 17. And before that, I was working in the oil and gas industry. I said I have a civil engineering background. I found myself in pipeline and subsea infrastructure design and did some desk-based design work, went offshore to install the kit that I was designing up until, I saw a future in the oil and gas industry for me because it was interesting as an engineer. It was very interesting and the money was good, which helps. And it was good up until around 2015 when the US fracked everything out here and the price of hydrocarbons dropped to, whatever, 20% of what it was. I think oil was 110 when I started in 2010 in the oil and gas industry up in Aberdeen in Scotland. And by 2015, it was down to like 30. Now it's back up. That was just a low point in the industry. That's what the oil price does. So I was out of work for a while and I was thinking about doing an MBA for a while. So I decided to move back to Dublin. I was living in London at the time. I had just been offshore and, loved it. Seeing the kit that I was installing was a huge moment. You realize that drawings really don't give you an appreciation for the size of this stuff. So we were lifting like pipelines off the off the deck of the vessel and installing them on the seabed and installing flexible pipelines. So it was cool. But anyway, that was good up until 2015. The price of oil dropped. That company went into administration. And I had one of those moments where I was like, okay, what do I do now? I was 25, 26, 7 at the time and had a great background and specialized experience in the oil and gas industry. But they were kind of worthless to me now because there were so many engineers being spat out of the industry because companies were canceling projects and some companies were going bust, including the one I was working for. So decided to do the MBA, moved back to Dublin, moved back in with my parents for 6 months. Mum and Dad, I love you guys, but 6 months was enough. um, so so I did that for 6 months, did the MBA, and then towards the end of the MBA, I'm still having this oh crap moment. What do I do? And I started having conversations with people in the aviation industry in Dublin, which is a commercial aviation space. All the
Mhm.
aircraft leasing is in Dublin. Like 25% of the world's commercial fleet are leased out of Dublin, to
Wow.
give you a scale. When you go on Flight Radar and you see all those commercial airplanes, 25% of them are leased out of Dublin, Ireland. So there's a lot of work there.
That touches on too. I think it's not just for people that are they haven't been in the workplace yet and they want to go towards the aviation side to understand what's available to them, but you can do career changes too. There's plenty of opportunity to move from other industries. So appreciate
Yeah,
you sharing that story.
yeah, and for anyone, I think I was having this conversation the other day with someone about um, just what I think it was something to do with networking or whatever. But I said I haven't had all of my jobs have been through conversations. I've applied for right coming out of engineering. I was applying for hundreds of engineering jobs in Dublin, which is a complete waste of time because it was 2010 and there were no cranes left in Dublin City. It was the depths of the recession, and there were no jobs for engineers, and that's why I moved to Scotland. And that was through a conversation my brother had with the company, got me an interview in that company, turned into a job that I did for 5 years. Um, the next job was a company I wanted to get into, and I knocked on the door literally, and hounded the HR manager until they gave me an interview. Um, and then after the MBA, I was at a conference I met someone that became the job at Boeing. And then the job with Jetcraft was another conversation. So my advice is, get out there, get to conferences for whatever industry you're interested in, and start talking to people. Start talking to as many people as possible. And when they ask you what you're doing, tell them you're looking for a job. Because if they don't know, you're looking for a job, people have to look for jobs. There's nothing wrong with saying that to someone, right? I'll give you the story from the conference in Dublin. I started talking with a guy who's working for a leasing company, and we're at a high top table during a coffee break. And I had a badge because I got a free badge from Dublin Aerospace. A buddy put Dublin Aerospace on my badge just randomly. He worked with a company, and he worked with one of the leasing companies, and he got me a free pass for the day, and he printed out my pass, Colin Dunne, Dublin Aerospace, because we had been having a conversation about Conor McCarthy, great Irishman that owns Dublin Aerospace. I had met him. He's actually a friend of my dad's from a very long time ago. And I met him the week before for a chat about my career. Where was I going? And was the aviation space, the leasing space, a good road? And a friend, Shane, put that on my badge, Dublin Aerospace. So we're having a coffee during the coffee break at a high top table, and the guy beside me said, "Oh, how's Conor McCarthy at Dublin Aerospace? Tell him I was asking for him." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm caught." So I was straight out though. I said, "Well, I'm actually not working for for Dublin Aerospace, but Conor's great. I met him last week," which was just a funny coincidence. And then we got talking, and I said I'm coming to the end of an MBA, and I'm looking for jobs, and I'm trying to figure out if the leasing space is a good, good avenue for me. And as I'm telling him, there's someone else listening, and that guy, Alan, still with Boeing, came up to me after the conference or after the coffee break, and he said, "Hey, Colin, I heard you having a conversation with at the table. I'm going to be looking for an account manager coming up in about a month, 2 months time. And I'd love to consider you. Send me your CV. We'll see if it's the right fit. And that became a job.
You hear a lot of people talk about the networking aspect, but I still think it's extremely underrated because, like you, so many of my career opportunities have come through connections and mutual friends and all that stuff. And the other people I talk to as well, my buddy that's flying the Lear 60, he is one of the best networkers that I know. And he's able to get his friends jobs with, other corporate programs and, even at the airlines, the the networking side is huge.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense that I've ended up in this career because if I'm not working an aircraft transaction, I'm trying to figure out where the next one is coming from.
Sure.
That's all networking and prospecting and getting in front of the right people, increasing your chances of uh, winning a client.
For getting into it, networking huge. I guess for staying in it, networking huge. What do you think is, or what's your advice for long term success in the industry?
Comes back to your name and reputation. Like that's as a broker, that's all you have. You don't have a product. You are the product. And if you're tainted because you've done some bad deals in the past, well then, it's going to hurt you in the long run.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want to hear more from aviation professionals just like Colin, you can subscribe on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. If there's a career or aviation professional you'd love to hear from, let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you right back here on the AirPod.